Why am I always the one picking up the pieces? I muttered to myself, slamming the door behind me. My name's Audrey and I've spent my life doing the things no one else wants to, until one night, I decided to stop. But what happened next? Let's just say the story you think you know isn't the one you're about to hear. To everyone else, I'm just another face in the crowd, drifting through life with no more recognition than anyone else. But at home, I've been relegated to the background for as long as I can remember. My role? The reliable one. The one you call when there's a mess to clean or when the little things need to be taken care of. My name might be Audrey, but in my family, I might as well be invisible. It's funny, really. I've spent so many years trying to carve out a life for myself. My own apartment, my own space. But even now, the distance doesn't seem to matter. No matter how far away I live, they still seem to know exactly where to find me when they need help. And most of the time, I don't mind. Or at least I tell myself I don't. But there's a growing frustration inside me that I can't quite shake. It's like a shadow that's been trailing me for years, never quite visible, but always there. Today was no different. I was sitting in my small quiet apartment, drinking my morning coffee when my phone buzzed. I didn't even need to check the screen to know who it was. The caller ID was a dead giveaway. It was Mom. "Audrey, you'll be here Friday, right?" Her voice was brisk, already set with the purpose of someone who's planned everything down to the smallest detail. I shifted in my chair, tapping my fingers on the rim of my mug. "What's going on Friday?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though there was a knot forming in my stomach. There was a brief silence before she replied, almost as if surprised I didn't know. "The dinner for Brian's promotion, of course, you know the one." "Oh, right, Brian's promotion. That was the highlight of the year, wasn't it? The dinner that had nothing to do with me, as always." I swallowed a sigh before responding. "I wasn't invited." "Well, of course not," she said dismissively, as if it should have been obvious. "It's mostly Brian's colleagues and friends. You wouldn't really fit in." The words stung more than I expected. I pressed my lips together, trying to maintain control. "But you still want me to come and set the table?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Exactly," she replied, her tone suddenly cheery. "You're so good at these things, Audrey. You've always had an eye for detail. Don't worry about staying long, just help set up and make sure everything's perfect. We'll handle it from there." I could feel my pulse quicken as the familiar wave of anger swept over me. I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in, and for a brief moment I was back in my childhood home, always behind the scenes, never front and center, just an extra. It wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. But I nodded, like I always did. "That's fine," I said, my voice calm, even though my insides were anything but. "What time do you want me there?" "4 sharp," she answered. "We'll need time to get the table set, the candles lit, and the appetizers plated. Oh, and can you bring some extra napkins? We might run out." "Sure," I said, forcing a tight smile. She couldn't see it, but I felt the muscles in my face stretch painfully. "Thanks, Audrey, you're such a lifesaver," she added before hanging up, not even waiting for me to say goodbye. I set my phone down slowly, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. I stared out the window, watching the city move below, and I felt like I was a ghost, fading in and out of my own life. I had moved out to escape this. To escape being the one who always took the fall. To have some space, to figure out who I was outside of their constant demands. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter how far I ran. I was still just Audrey, the one who cleaned up after everyone else. The one who fixed everything. A buzz from my phone snapped me out of my thoughts. A notification flashed on the screen. It was from a reservation app I hadn't used in months. The suggestion? A table for one at my favorite restaurant this Friday night. For a moment I just stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the reserve button. What if this time I didn't show up for them? What if this time I just took care of me? My heart raced as I pressed the button, confirming my reservation. There it was. My escape. A simple action that felt like the most radical thing I'd done in years. I wasn't going to set the table for them this time. I wasn't going to fix their mess. For once, they could manage without me. I can't explain it, but as the days passed, a strange sense of calm washed over me. I wasn't thinking about their dinner party. I wasn't checking my phone every 5 minutes, but worrying about whether they were going to message me again, demanding my help. For once, I felt free. My mind was clear, and I was focused on the idea of just living my life. Still, as Friday evening approached, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling of guilt. Was I being selfish? Was I wrong to just leave them hanging like this? The questions looped endlessly in my mind, gnawing at me, but every time they appeared, I pushed them away. They had taken me for granted for so long. Maybe, just maybe, they needed to feel what it was like to do it all themselves, to realize how much I had been carrying all these years. But when my phone buzzed on Friday afternoon, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of anxiety. I glanced at the screen. It was Mom again. "Audrey, don't forget to pick up the extra napkins," she texted, followed by, "Brian's boss is bringing his wife, so make sure the table setting is perfect." I stared at the message, my fingers gripping the phone tighter. Part of me wanted to snap, to shout at her and tell her everything I had been holding inside. But instead I exhaled slowly, and with a deep breath, I silenced the notifications. They could figure it out. I wasn't going to save them this time. Still, I couldn't deny the pit that formed in my stomach. What if everything fell apart? What if it all went wrong? I tried to shake the thought. I didn't need to feel guilty for taking care of myself. This wasn't about them. It was about me. For once, it was about me. The day felt heavy. I moved around my apartment, packing my bag with the essentials for my night out: makeup, dress, and a light sweater for the cool evening air. But no matter how many times I told myself this was for me, a dull ache lingered in my chest, like a nagging reminder of what I was leaving behind. As I applied a coat of mascara, I caught my reflection in the mirror, and for a brief moment I didn't recognize myself. Who was this woman, dressed up and ready to go to a restaurant by herself, without the familiar roles of housekeeper, party planner, and all-around invisible member of the family weighing her down? It felt foreign, but not necessarily in a bad way. More like a breath of fresh air. Still, the lingering thought tugged at my mind. What if they can't handle it without me? I shook my head, trying to banish the thought. No, this was the point. This was the change I needed. But that didn't stop my mind from spiraling with all the little things I knew would go wrong. The table would be mismatched, the appetizers would be forgotten in the fridge, my mom would be pacing around, anxious and frantically trying to make everything perfect, without me there to fix it. And Brian? Well, he'd probably be the first to throw his hands up and say it wasn't his problem. By the time I was ready to leave, the nervous energy had settled into something a bit more daring, a touch of excitement bubbling under the surface. I wasn't just going to dinner. I was stepping into a new version of myself. No more running around after everyone. No more being their safety net. Tonight, I was a guest in my own life, free from expectations. Still, as I reached for my purse, my phone buzzed once again. "Don't forget to pick up the extra napkins," the message read. My mom's words felt almost robotic now, like I was programmed to respond. I let out a short laugh, bitter and light at the same time. This was the last time I'd let her control me. I wasn't a servant, I was a person. And this dinner wasn't my responsibility. I didn't respond. Not to the message, not to the call that followed, not to the 3 others after that. Instead, I slid the phone into my bag and headed out the door. I wasn't turning back. The drive to the restaurant was longer than usual. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, but it wasn't out of anxiety about my decision. It was the anticipation of what this night meant. As I parked and walked toward the entrance, a wave of peace washed over me. For the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't rushing. I wasn't worried about what needed to be done or who I needed to please. It was just me, walking into a place where the only expectation was that I enjoyed my time. The waiter greeted me with a smile as I entered. I could feel the slight tension in my shoulders ease, the tension that I hadn't even realized I had been carrying for so long. "Good evening, are you ready to order?" he asked. Not just yet, I thought, taking in the warmth of the restaurant and the soft hum of conversations around me. "But I'll have a glass of your house red to start." He nodded and disappeared into the background. And for a moment, I just stood there, breathing in the stillness of it all. I could feel my pulse steady as I glanced around the room. Couples sat at tables nearby, some laughing, others sharing quiet moments. There was something so comforting about the noise, the buzz of life around me, and yet, for once, I was the one at the center of my own universe. It felt like a small rebellion against everything I had been to everyone else. My phone buzzed again in my purse, but I ignored it. I already knew what it would say. I had already imagined their frantic messages, the missed calls, the disappointment in their voices. For a brief moment, a flicker of guilt tried to settle in my chest, but I pushed it away. No, I thought. They will figure it out. This is not my problem anymore. When the wine arrived, I took a sip, savoring the deep, rich flavor. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the warmth spread through me. This was my choice. I had chosen to be here, and for once, I wasn't trying to make everything perfect for someone else. For the first time, the weight of their expectations felt distant. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text. "Where are you, Audrey? The guests will be here soon. Why aren't you answering?" I smirked, the bitterness rising in my throat. I read it twice, letting the words settle in. It was strange, knowing that their night was falling apart because I wasn't there to fix it. But the feeling that washed over me wasn't regret, it was relief. This time they would have to see what it felt like. What if this time they have to deal with the mess they created without me? I couldn't help but picture it, the chaos back at their house. My mom, trying to salvage the table settings, the candles unlit, the appetizers untouched. Brian would probably roll his eyes and make some offhand comment. And my dad? He would likely sigh as if it was all my fault, but deep down, I knew he was just as tired of it as I was. But no matter what happened, I wasn't going back. I took another sip of wine, this time savoring it even longer, letting the smooth liquid slip down my throat. There was a strange satisfaction in knowing they couldn't count on me this time, that I wasn't just there to clean up their mess, to make things work when everything fell apart. The waiter returned with the menu, and I ordered a dish I had been eyeing for months, but had never dared to try. I smiled to myself. This was what freedom tasted like, making decisions without the pressure of others, without the constant expectation to be something I wasn't. As the meal arrived, beautifully plated and steaming, I couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of satisfaction and pride. Maybe it was the food, maybe it was the wine, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had made the right choice. And in the background, I could almost hear their voices, my mom's sharp tone, Brian's casual indifference, my dad's exasperated sigh. Let them scramble. I was done. And as dessert was set before me, a rich slice of tiramisu that melted in my mouth with each bite, I knew that no matter what happened at their dinner party, I had done something that would matter for me. Tonight was mine, and it felt damn good. By the time dessert arrived, I had long forgotten about the chaos that I was sure was unfolding at my parents' house. It was hard to concentrate on anything other than the rich, creamy layers of tiramisu that melted on my tongue and the gentle hum of conversation around me. It felt surreal to just be here, at peace with myself, enjoying a meal that I had chosen entirely for my own pleasure, no demands, no expectations. But then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed again. My heart skipped a beat, though I knew what it would be. I opened the screen slowly, half expecting to see the familiar strings of angry texts, and sure enough, there it was. "Where are you, Audrey? Guests are arriving. Everything's falling apart. We need you now." My fingers tightened around the phone. For a second, a tight knot formed in my chest. The feeling wasn't guilt, not exactly, but something else, something like unease. Was I really doing the right thing? Couldn't I just go back for a minute, just to fix a few things to make them happy? No, I thought firmly. I was done. This was not my problem. Not anymore. I set the phone down, determined to savor the moment. I wasn't going to give in. I wasn't going to let them pull me back into that life of invisibility and endless obligation. But as I stared into the soft glow of the restaurant's lighting, I couldn't help but wonder what was happening back there. My mother, probably frantically running around, trying to make everything perfect. My dad, maybe pacing in the background, trying to figure out what went wrong. And Brian. Well, Brian would most likely be sipping his drink, totally unaware of the mess. I couldn't help but imagine it. The table, mismatched and imperfect, the candles unlit, the appetizers still in the fridge, my mother trying to salvage the evening with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. the guests walking into the chaos, their glances quickly giving away their discomfort. I could already hear the tension in the air, the muffled awkwardness of a dinner that wasn't going according to plan. But I wasn't there to see it, and I wouldn't be. At the restaurant, time seemed to move slower. I was blissfully lost in the moment, tasting the food, feeling the warmth of the place, the joy of not being needed by anyone but myself. But as I took another bite of my dessert, I couldn't shake the thought that my absence had already made a significant impact. I wondered, though briefly, how long it would take them to figure it out. Would they even realize how much I had done for them over the years? Would they come to understand that I was more than just a tool they used when they needed things done? As I finished my tiramisu, the phone buzzed once more. I checked it, half expecting another frantic message. This time it was from my dad. The message read, "We're sorry, Audrey. We shouldn't have assumed you'd handle everything. Can we talk later?" I blinked, staring at the words as they sank in. My dad apologizing. The man who never admitted when he was wrong. I read the message again, and for a brief moment something warm stirred inside me. Could it be? Could they actually be starting to understand? But before I could get lost in the thought, I shook my head and put the phone down. It wasn't about them. It wasn't about their apology, no matter how much I wanted it to be. Tonight, it was about me. Back at my parents' house, everything was falling apart. My mom was pacing in the kitchen, her voice sharp as she barked instructions. She sounded more frantic than I had ever heard her before, and I could almost hear her wringing her hands in frustration. "Where is she?" she demanded, her tone cutting through the air. "She said she'd be here. How could she just disappear?" My dad tried to calm her down, though it was clear he was frustrated as well. "Maybe she's just running late," he offered weakly, though even he knew that was a flimsy excuse. But my mom wouldn't hear it. "Late? She was supposed to be here an hour ago. The table isn't set, the candles aren't lit, and the appetizers are still in the fridge. How could she do this to me?" Her voice cracked on the last part, the betrayal evident in her words. She was angry, yes, but there was also something else, something like disappointment. I could imagine Brian walking in then, adjusting his tie with that smug grin of his. "Honestly," he said with a shrug, "I don't know why you keep relying on her. She's always been flaky." Flaky. That word echoed in my mind, and for a second I almost felt it physically. The word that described me in their eyes. But it wasn't true. I wasn't flaky. I was just tired. Tired of being the one who was always expected to show up, always expected to clean up their mess, to make things right for them. My dad tried to diffuse the tension, but his efforts were half-hearted. "Well, she's not here now, so we'll just have to deal with it ourselves." Brian rolled his eyes. "Yeah, no kidding." He took a drink from his glass, completely uninterested in the mess he was part of. I smiled faintly as I took another sip of my wine. Let them figure it out. The chaos was unfolding exactly as I had imagined, and it was strangely satisfying. For years, I had been the one to clean up after them, the one who made sure everything was perfect. But tonight, I wasn't there to hold it all together. I was free. Back at my parents' house, the evening was unraveling. The guests were arriving, and I could picture the awkward silences as they stepped into a house that wasn't quite ready for them. My mom would plaster on a smile, but I knew it wouldn't be enough to cover the tension in the air. I felt no remorse. I had given them every ounce of myself for years, and this time I was letting go. This time it was their turn to experience what it was like when I wasn't there to fix everything. As the night wore on, the chaos continued, but I was a world away, sitting at my table enjoying my own company. The phone buzzed again, but I didn't even look. I had made my choice. Tonight was mine. Let them scramble. I was done being their backup, done being the one who cleaned up their messes. And for the first time in years, it felt like a victory. The night stretched on, each moment more liberating than the last. As I sat in the restaurant, leaning back in my chair, I allowed myself to fully soak in the serenity of the evening. My mind was calm, far removed from the chaos I imagined was unfolding at my parents' house. I wasn't concerned with their struggles anymore. I wasn't there to be their problem solver. Tonight was for me, and I had no intention of letting anything or anyone take that away. Still, a strange sense of satisfaction lingered. It wasn't just the peace I felt, It was the realization that for once, I wasn't running after them, putting their needs above my own. I had chosen myself, something I hadn't done in years. And that, more than anything, was the sweetest thing I'd tasted all night. The tiramisu, smooth and rich, was my last bite of the evening. I lingered over it, savoring every spoonful. There was something comforting in knowing that they could no longer rely on me for the little things. I had spent so much time trying to make everything perfect for them for their benefit that I had forgotten what it felt like to live for myself. But tonight, I was reminded. I wasn't their servant. I wasn't just the one who made sure things worked behind the scenes. I was Audrey, and I mattered. The next morning, the world felt quieter. When I woke up, there were no frantic calls or barrage of text messages waiting for me. The silence was almost deafening in its peace, but I welcomed it. It was a small victory in itself, not having to face the usual demands that came with being a daughter in this family. I brewed my coffee slowly, savoring the warmth as it filled my cup. I sat by the window, watching the sunlight filter through the curtains, feeling completely at ease. There was no weight of expectation hanging over me, no list of things I had to do for them. For the first time in ages, I felt free. I felt like I could breathe. I knew the night before had left a mark on my family. I had been absent, and while part of me had been prepared to hear their anger or frustration, I had not anticipated how deeply it would resonate with. And then, my phone buzzed. It was my dad. "Hey, Audrey," his message began, and I could feel the sincerity in his words even through the screen. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Last night, we shouldn't have assumed you'd handle everything. It wasn't fair to you." I blinked at the message. It wasn't the type of apology I had expected. My dad, the man who never admitted fault, had reached out to me. The words hung there in the air between us, as if everything in our relationship had shifted just a little bit. I read the message again. "We shouldn't have assumed you'd handle everything. The years of being overlooked, of being expected to pick up the slack, all the silent sacrifices I had made, all of it was suddenly acknowledged, if only in small words." I hadn't expected him to apologize. If anything, I had imagined them continuing to demand more of me, despite everything. But this felt different. This felt like the beginning of something new. I took a deep breath, then replied, keeping my tone calm but genuine, "Thanks, Dad, I really appreciate it. I think we need to talk more about this sometime." The message was simple, but it was a step forward. It was a sign that maybe, just maybe, they were starting to see me as more than the invisible one in the family, the one who fixed things, who made everything right, but who never asked for anything in return. Later that day, Amanda came over. She was my sounding board, my friend who had been there for me through all of it. She knew the weight of what I'd been carrying and had always been a quiet supporter, offering advice when I needed it and a glass of wine when things got tough. "So, how'd it go?" she asked, flopping dramatically onto my couch with a carton of takeout in hand. "Did the dinner party fall apart without you?" I let out a small laugh, shaking my head. "Pretty much, but the real surprise? My dad actually apologized. I didn't see that coming." Amanda's eyes widened in disbelief. "Wait, seriously? That's huge. What did he say?" I smiled, leaning back against the cushions. "He said he was sorry. They realized how much they'd come to rely on me, without even acknowledging how much I'd been doing. It wasn't much, but it was a start." "About time, huh?" Amanda said, raising her glass as if in a toast. "Well, it sounds like you've done what they never could. Put yourself first. I think this might be a turning point for them, and for you." I nodded, feeling a quiet sense of pride. For once, I had stood up for myself. I had drawn the line, and instead of being punished for it, I was finally being heard. The following morning, I woke up to a call from my dad. His voice was softer than usual, almost hesitant. "Hey, Audrey," he began, and I could sense the change in him. "I just wanted to apologize again. For everything." I was quiet for a moment, letting the words sink in. He had never been one to apologize for anything, at least not like this. "It's okay, Dad," I replied gently. "I just needed to feel seen, you know? Like I matter for who I am, not just what I do." "I get it now," he said, and I could tell he meant it. "We're sorry for taking you for granted all these years. You deserve more than that." The conversation wasn't perfect, but it felt like progress. I could sense that my dad was trying, truly trying, to understand me. For the first time, he wasn't just asking for something from me, he was acknowledging my worth as a person, not just as the helper. That night, after a long day of quiet reflection, my phone buzzed again. It was my mom. "We're planning a family gathering next month. Would you like to come as a guest?" she asked, and I could almost hear the tentative tone in her message. I blinked, surprised by the wording. No assumptions, no expectations, just a simple invitation. It was a small change, but it was enough. It was the first time she had phrased it like that, an invitation, not a demand. I paused for a moment before replying. "I'd love to. Thanks for asking." The days that followed were quieter. My family was still the same in many ways, but there was a shift. My mom started calling me not just for help but to ask how I was doing. My dad reached out more often just to check in. It wasn't a perfect transformation, but it was real. The next family gathering, I walked into my parents' house feeling lighter than I had in years. My mom greeted me warmly, and for the first time, I felt like she saw me. Not as the helper, but as an equal. Things weren't perfect, and they probably never would be. But for the first time, I felt like they truly saw me. And for once, I could see myself clearly too. And that, more than anything, was the beginning of something better. The weeks that followed were filled with quiet, unspoken changes. Nothing dramatic or sweeping, but small, significant shifts that slowly started to redefine the way I interacted with my family, and the way I saw myself. I no longer felt like I was always running in circles, constantly meeting the needs of others without ever being acknowledged. Slowly, they were starting to see me, not just as the dependable Audrey, the one who cleaned up their messes, but as a person with my own needs, my own desires, and my own voice. The most striking change was in the way my mom began to reach out to me. It wasn't just about needing something done anymore. She started to ask me how I was doing, what I wanted, and, perhaps most surprisingly, what I thought. It was subtle at first, but it was there. In the little conversations we had, the way she listened to me for the first time in years, not just as someone who existed to help, but as a daughter with her own thoughts and feelings. One afternoon I received a text from her, not about a family event or a request for help, but just a simple message asking if I'd like to have lunch with her. I was thinking we could go to that new cafe down the street. Just the two of us. No agenda, she wrote. For a moment I was taken aback. There was no mention of Brian's promotion or the next family gathering. It was just... I couldn't remember the last time we'd had a conversation like that. A conversation where I wasn't expected to be something I wasn't. I smiled to myself before replying, "I'd love to, let's do it." Lunch with my mom was easy. It was comfortable in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. We didn't talk about the past or all the things that had been left unsaid. Instead, we talked about the present, about the book I was reading, about a new recipe I wanted to try, about the changes we were both navigating even if we didn't have the words for them yet. There was no rush, no pressure. Just two people, sitting across from each other enjoying a meal. As I looked at her, I realized how much we had both changed. My mom, once so consumed with managing everything and everyone, was now making space for me to be more than just the daughter who was always there when they needed help. And I, for the first time in a long time, was learning to say yes to myself, to let go of the guilt, to be present without feeling like I had to apologize for it. When lunch was over, we walked out of the cafe, and my mom put her arm around my shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like the most profound one she had ever offered. For the first time, she wasn't just reaching out to me for help. She was reaching out because she genuinely cared. One evening, a few days after the lunch with my mom, I received a message from my dad. It was short, simple, but meaningful. He asked if I wanted to come over for dinner that weekend. This time, as a guest, he wrote, and I could feel the sincerity in his words. He wasn't just asking me to do something for them. He wasn't expecting me to step into my old role. He was inviting me to be a part of their lives in a way that acknowledged who I was, not just what I did for them. The invitation was small, but it meant the world to me. For years, I had been the one who showed up, took charge, and made everything happen. But now, they were giving me the space to just be. And for the first time I realized that I didn't have to earn my place in this family. I belonged simply because I existed. That weekend, I went over for dinner. When I arrived, my dad greeted me with a smile and my mom offered a warm hug, as if they both knew this was more than just another family gathering. It was a new chapter. And I wasn't just a helper anymore. I was a daughter, a guest, and for the first time, an equal. The dinner was simple. No grand gestures or perfect table settings, no need to make everything flawless. We laughed over stories from our past, shared a bottle of wine, and just enjoyed being together. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't about meeting expectations. It was about being present, enjoying each other's company, and letting things be imperfect. As the months went by, the changes continued. My family didn't suddenly become perfect, and we didn't have grand emotional breakthroughs every time we spoke. But the small moments, the quiet, sincere apologies, the invitations to join without strings attached, the recognition that I was more than just the dependable one, these moments added up. One evening, Amanda came over again, bringing takeout and her usual flair. "So, how's life as a boundary-setting queen?" she teased, leaning back on the couch with a playful grin. I laughed, feeling more at ease than I had in years. "Surprisingly good. It's strange, though. Now that I'm not constantly running around for them, I have so much more time for myself." Amanda raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "What are you going to do with all this newfound freedom?" I thought for a moment, then smiled. "I've been thinking about it. Maybe I'll take that trip I've always talked about. Greece, Italy, somewhere warm and far away." Amanda's eyes lit up. "Now that's the Audrey I want to see. Go live your life." In the months that followed, my family continued to change, slowly but surely. My mom still asked for my help from time to time, but now it was different. She acknowledged my boundaries, respected my time, and, for the first time, treated me like an equal. And when I did help, it felt like a choice, not an obligation. Brian predictably stayed indifferent. He was still self-absorbed, still the one who didn't notice the effort that went into keeping things running smoothly. But I had learned that his validation didn't matter. I no longer needed him to see me because I had learned to see myself. One evening, a few weeks after the dinner, I received another text from my mom. "We're planning a family gathering next month. Would you like to come as a guest?" I smiled as I read the message. No assumptions, no expectations. Just an invitation. It was a small but powerful change. For the first time, I was being asked to be there as myself. Not as the helper, the cleaner, the one who made everything perfect. I thought for a moment before replying, "I'd love to. Thanks for asking." When the day of the gathering arrived, I walked into my parents' house and everything felt different. The atmosphere wasn't one of pressure, of hurried perfection. My mom greeted me warmly, her smile genuine. The table wasn't perfectly set, but it didn't need to be. My dad was cooking dinner in the kitchen, his usual jovial self, and Brian? He was sitting on the couch talking with some of the other guests, just like everyone else. For the first time, I wasn't rushing around behind the scenes. I wasn't frantically trying to make things perfect for them. I was just there, present, and for once, that was enough. As the evening went on, I realized that this wasn't just a family gathering, it was a new beginning. It wasn't perfect, and it never would be. But that was okay. Because, for the first time in my life, I wasn't just a part of the background. I was a part of the family, truly seen and respected for who I was. And as I left that night, I felt a deep sense of contentment settle over me. Things had changed. Not all at once, but they had changed. I had learned how to set boundaries, how to prioritize myself, and most importantly, how to be at peace with who I was. This was just the beginning. The weeks following the family gathering felt surreal. As the days passed, I found myself reflecting on how much had shifted, not just with my family, but within me. It wasn't just about the small, quiet changes in my interactions with them. It was about how I had started seeing myself differently. I wasn't the person who only existed to fulfill others' needs anymore. I wasn't the one who could be relied upon to fix everything. I had become someone who had learned to say no, someone who had learned to step back and let things unfold as they would. There was a freedom in that. A weight lifted from my shoulders. I could finally breathe without feeling like I was suffocating under the constant expectations that had defined my life for so long. Amanda noticed the change almost immediately. She always had an uncanny ability to pick up on things about me that even I hadn't fully realized yet. One afternoon, she showed up unannounced with her usual drama, armed with takeout and a smile that could light up a room. "So, tell me," she asked, setting the food down on the coffee table. "How's life as the boundary-setting queen, still enjoying the peace?" I chuckled, taking a seat beside her on the couch. "It's honestly been amazing. I didn't realize how much I was drowning before. I've got more time now to just live, to enjoy life on my own terms." She raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Sounds like someone's finally figured it out. So, what's next for the new Audrey?" I paused for a moment, turning the question over in my mind. What was next? What did I want? It felt like a question I hadn't been allowed to ask myself in years. My whole life had been defined by my role as the one who helped, who fixed, who took care of everything. But now, I had a clean slate. The possibilities seemed endless, even if I didn't have it all figured out yet. "I've been thinking a lot about that," I said finally. "I've always wanted to travel. I've talked about it forever but never actually done it. I think I'm going to take that trip I've always dreamed of. Maybe Greece, maybe Italy, somewhere warm and far away, somewhere where I can just be me." Amanda grinned, raising an imaginary glass in a mock toast. "Now that's the Audrey I want to see. Go live your life, girl. You've earned it." Her words were a catalyst, a spark that ignited a new sense of excitement in me. For so long, I had lived my life for others, never daring to prioritize my own dreams. But now, I was seeing the world through a different lens. It was my time. I had every right to pursue the things I had put on hold for so long. As I began to plan the trip, I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation. It wasn't just about going somewhere new. It was about choosing something for myself, making my happiness a priority, and embracing the freedom that came with it. The more I planned, the more I realized how much I had been holding myself back. There were so many things I had convinced myself I couldn't do, so many places I had convinced myself I didn't deserve to go. But now, with each booking and every step I took toward making the trip a reality, I began to see that those barriers were all self-imposed. The world was wide, and I had the power to choose how I wanted to experience it. But the trip wasn't the only change. Over time, I also noticed how my relationships with others had evolved. I wasn't just showing up to events or family gatherings because I had to. I was showing up because I wanted to. I was setting boundaries not just with my family but with everyone else in my life. I was saying no to things that didn't align with my happiness, and yes to the things that made me feel alive. One afternoon my dad called, his voice softer than I had ever heard it before. "Hey Audrey," he said, "I just wanted to say that I'm proud of you. I know we've had our differences, but I see how you're taking care of yourself now, and I'm really proud of how far you've come." I was silent for a moment, unsure of how to respond. I hadn't expected this from him. For so many years my dad had never acknowledged how much I had done for the family, but now he was seeing me for the first time. Not just as a daughter who was always there, but as a person with her own dreams, her own life. "Thanks, Dad," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "It means a lot to hear you say that." The trip to Greece came sooner than I expected. I packed my bags with excitement and anticipation, but also with a quiet sense of wonder at how much my life had changed. When I boarded the plane, I wasn't just heading to a new destination. I was heading toward a new chapter of my life. A chapter where I was free to be myself, unburdened by the weight of anyone else's expectations. The first few days in Greece felt surreal. The bright sun, the stunning landscapes, the quiet mornings by the sea, it was everything I had imagined and more. But more than anything, it was the realization that I was here because I wanted to be. I wasn't chasing anyone else's approval. I was just living for me. One evening, as I sat at a small cafe in Santorini, sipping on a glass of wine, I found myself thinking about my family. Things were different now, but they weren't perfect. Brian still barely acknowledged me unless it suited him, and my mom and dad still had their moments of clinging to old patterns, but for the first time, I didn't need their validation. I had found my own peace. I thought about how far I had come, from being the one who was always taken for granted, to being someone who had learned to say no, to being someone who was finally embracing the beauty of her own life. The wind ruffled my hair, and I closed my eyes for a moment, taking it all in. The world was wide, and I had the power to choose how I wanted to live it. And for the first time, I knew that whatever came next, I was ready. The weeks I spent in Greece were transformative. Every day felt like a gift. From the crisp mornings spent wandering through the cobblestone streets of Santorini, to the quiet nights under the stars, sipping wine and watching the waves crash against the shore. The beauty of it all was overwhelming, but it was more than just the landscape, it was the peace I found within myself. I found myself reflecting often during my time away. It wasn't just about the physical distance between me and my family, it was about the emotional distance I had finally created. I had spent so many years tied to their expectations, to the idea that my worth came from how much I gave to them. But now, I understood that my worth didn't depend on them. It didn't depend on anyone but me. I'd spent years bending to everyone else's needs, and in the process, I had lost sight of who I really was. But here in this foreign place, I was reconnecting with myself. I was no longer just Audrey, the dependable one, the one who was always ready to pick up the pieces. I was Audrey, a woman with dreams, a woman who could choose her own path. I would never forget that moment on the balcony of my hotel, overlooking the sea, when I realized how far I had come. The weight I'd carried for so long had lifted, replaced with a newfound sense of confidence. It wasn't the kind of self-assurance that came from external validation. It was a quiet, internal knowing that I had done the work to heal. I had set boundaries, I had chosen myself, and in doing so I had unlocked a new version of my life. When I returned home, things were still different. I could feel it immediately. My family had shifted too. Not completely, but enough that I could tell they were beginning to understand. My dad called shortly after I landed, his voice filled with a warmth I hadn't heard before. "Hey Audrey, I hope your trip was everything you wanted it to be," he said, and I could sense the pride in his words. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversations, and I just wanted to say, thank you for being patient with us, with me." I could feel my heart soften. This wasn't just an apology, it was more. It was acknowledgement, recognition, and a slow but steady understanding that they had taken me for granted for too long. And I wasn't just their helper anymore. I was their daughter, someone deserving of respect and care. "Thanks, Dad," I replied, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "It really means a lot to hear you say that." The first family gathering after my trip was subtle in its significance. It wasn't a grand event, nor was it the perfect, pristine affair that my mom had once insisted on. But that was what made it different. The table wasn't perfectly set, and the appetizers weren't timed just right. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that I was invited as a guest, not a worker. I wasn't running around making everything perfect. I was sitting at the table, enjoying the company, and simply being. My mom, for the first time, didn't try to control everything. She smiled at me across the table, and there was an unspoken understanding between us. She had seen the change in me. She had seen me set boundaries, and while it had been hard for her at first, I knew she respected it now. And that was enough. Brian, ever the self-absorbed one, still didn't fully understand, but I didn't care. I wasn't doing this for him. I was doing this for me. One evening, a few weeks after my return, my mom invited me out for coffee. We sat at our usual spot, a small cafe near her house, and for the first time in what felt like forever, it was just the two of us, without the weight of family obligations hanging over us. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," she said quietly, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "About how I've treated you over the years. And I'm sorry, Audrey. I never realized how much I was asking of you. You've always been there, taking care of everything, but I never really saw how hard that was for you." I felt a lump form in my throat, but I smiled gently. "I know, Mom, but you don't have to apologize. I've learned a lot from it. I've learned that I have to take care of myself too. I can't always be the one who does everything for everyone else." She nodded, a wistful look in her eyes. "I see that now, and I'm proud of you. I think I'm starting to understand what you've been trying to say all these years." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping our coffee. It wasn't the resolution I had once dreamed of, a grand confession of all my hurt and frustration, but it was real. It was the beginning of something better. something more balanced. In the months that followed, I kept moving forward. I continued to set boundaries, continued to prioritize my own happiness. I didn't need my family to validate me anymore. I had learned to validate myself. And slowly, as I embraced this new chapter, I realized that my family was starting to do the same. They were trying in their own way. My dad still had his moments of clinging to old habits, but they were fewer and farther between. My mom, while still controlling at times, was beginning to respect my boundaries more, and she was learning how to ask for my company without expecting me to fix everything. Brian, predictably, remained the same. But even his indifference didn't bother me as much as it once had. I had learned that his behavior wasn't my problem anymore. I wasn't responsible for his happiness, or anyone else's for that matter. I was responsible for my own. One afternoon, as I sat in my apartment reflecting on the journey I had been on, I realized that I was no longer the same person I had been a year ago. I had grown. I had set boundaries. I had chosen myself. I had allowed myself to breathe, to live without constantly being weighed down by everyone else's expectations. And for the first time, I was truly at peace with who I was. The path ahead of me was still uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure: I was ready to walk it. The weight of the past had lifted, and the future, whatever it held, was mine to create. The months that followed were filled with a quiet kind of joy. It wasn't the kind of joy that came from grand, life-changing events, but a gentler, more subtle kind of happiness that grew from the small decisions I made every day. I was still living my life on my own terms, setting boundaries where I needed to, and prioritizing myself. For the first time in my life, I was truly living for me, not for anyone else. I had begun to make more intentional choices. I found myself exploring hobbies I'd long forgotten: painting, cooking, reading novels I had put off for years. I realized that there were so many parts of me that I had never fully explored, parts that had been buried under the weight of my family's expectations. Now, I had the space to discover them. I was beginning to feel like the person I had always been, underneath all the roles I had played for so long. Amanda, as always, was there to share in these moments of personal growth. One afternoon we were sitting in my apartment, taking a break from our usual banter over a bottle of wine, when she asked me, "So what's next for you, Audrey? I mean, you've already taken that trip, what else?" I thought about it for a moment. There was something about the question that felt both exciting and daunting at the same time. What was next? I had made so many changes in my life already, so much had shifted within me. But the truth was, I still didn't know exactly what I wanted to do next. And for the first time, I didn't feel the pressure to have it all figured out. "I don't know, Amanda," I said, laughing softly. "Maybe I'm just enjoying where I am right now. I've spent so many years trying to live up to other people's expectations, trying to make everyone else happy, that I've forgotten what it feels like to just be, to exist without constantly running after a goal or a checklist." Amanda raised her glass, a mischievous grin on her face. "Well, I think that's the best place to be, Audrey. I mean, think about it. You're not just surviving anymore, you're living. You've got the freedom to go wherever you want, to do whatever makes you happy. That's huge." Her words settled in my mind and I couldn't help but smile. She was right. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. I was embracing every little moment of peace, every small joy, and every opportunity that came my way. It wasn't always easy and it didn't always look perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I was at peace with that. As the year went on, my relationship with my family continued to evolve, though it was still a work in progress. We had our moments of tension, of falling back into old patterns, but the difference was now I had the strength to navigate those moments with grace and clarity. I no longer felt the need to rescue everyone, to take on the responsibility for things that weren't mine to bear. My mom and I still had our struggles, of course. She hadn't entirely stopped trying to control everything, but she was learning. She was learning that I wasn't going to step into that role anymore, that I had the right to say no, and that I was allowed to live my life on my own terms. She didn't always understand it, but she was starting to respect it. And my dad? He had become my greatest ally. He continued to express his pride in me, his recognition of how far I had come. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that meant everything to me. The most significant change, though, was in how I saw myself. I had spent so much time in the background doing everything for everyone else, but now I was living for me. I was no longer defined by my role in the family or by what I could do for others. I was defining myself. I was the one in control of my own story. One evening, after a particularly long day of work, I sat by the window in my apartment, watching the sunset over the city. It felt like a moment of quiet reflection, the kind I had missed out on for so many years. For the first time in a long time, I realized that I had arrived at a place where I could breathe, where I could simply exist, without feeling the constant weight of expectations. And in that moment, I knew that the journey I had started, the journey toward self-discovery, toward setting boundaries, toward living for me, was just the beginning. I didn't need to have it all figured out. I didn't need to know what the next chapter would look like, because I knew that I was writing it. The truth was, life was never going to be perfect. There would always be moments of uncertainty, moments of doubt, moments where I stumbled and fell. But I had learned something important over the past year. I could face those moments with strength and clarity. I had learned to set my own course, to choose my own path. And as the last rays of the sun faded from the sky, I smiled to myself, knowing that I was exactly where I needed to be. The story I had lived had been full of challenges, full of growth, and full of hard lessons. But it was my story, and it was far from over. For the first time in my life, I felt free. And that freedom was something I would never give up.